Two balls and a strike to count on Taylor. Reyes fires, swinging a drive, deep left field. It's his way back. Walk the ball.
What's up, everybody? Welcome into DodgerHeads Live, presented by DodgerBlue.com, part of the Blue Wire Podcast Network. My name is Jeff Spiegel, joined tonight by Matthew Moreno. And a day after, Matt, one of the bigger wins in recent memory for the Dodgers, Game 5 against the Padres. How are we feeling? How's the 24-hour later look back different from maybe the real-time reaction?
Still about the same, honestly. I mean, I'm impressed by what the Dodgers did to finish that series, both Game 4 and Game 5, and I think I have a question for our chat tonight that's joining us. What happened to the big bad Padres that the Dodgers were supposed to avoid? Right? Like, yeah. No, the Padres are the World Series favorite. They're this juggernaut. The Dodgers need to tank. Well, guess what? Padres are now out of the playoffs because the Dodgers beat them. They were rewarded by the baseball gods because, as I was trying to tell people, you play the game and you let the chips fall however they may.
Yeah. Hey, the chat also pointing out it's Matt Padres and 5 Moreno.
Yeah. No, see, the chat wasn't listening. I never picked the Padres. I specifically said, I'm not picking the Padres. I'm just going to say the Padres to bring some balance to our show so that Jeff, Daniel, Blake, Scott, Anthony, all of them could say Dodgers, and I would be just objective and bring some balance so that we couldn't get accused of unfair journalism. It was very important to me that we had that. We avoided that label.
We'll see if that remains the case when I ask Matt for his prediction in the Mets series in the NLCS here in a little bit. But we appreciate everybody that's joining us, as always, on Facebook, on YouTube, on Twitter. I was one of the people that said I didn't want to play the Padres because if we lost, it was going to hurt too bad. I'll be honest. It felt really, really good to beat the Padres. It felt really good to be the team that eliminated them, to see them go home. And so it's been a crazy, exciting 24 hours. I was going to say, I feel like Jim Harbaugh, who's got better than me. I got to watch my Oregon Ducks, Matt, defeat the Ohio State Buckeyes right before this game. And so what a 24 hours for me. My team beats the Padres in the NLDS. My college beats the number 2 team in the country at home. It's life is good over here in Oregon, Matt.
Yeah, that's great for you. We don't need to get into any other sports teams that I follow.
Did USC play today? I forget. Did USC play today?
I was busy getting stuff ready for the NLCS, so I actually didn't get to watch as much college football today as I normally would on a Saturday. But real quick, I want to see, Lola's asking if I privately believe the Dodgers would win.
Gosh, here we go.
Look, I was texting you guys going back to the final regular season series between the Dodgers and Padres, and this show is going to be focused on the NLCS, but this is my first time being on since the Dodgers took care of the Padres, so bear with us here. Jeff, you can attest that I texted you guys saying, I really don't know what the hype is with this Padres team. Like I took my wife to one of the games, like I saw them, gave them the old eye test, saw them in person, didn't come away very impressed, and I know that that's something you can attest to. I might have gone back and forth with the actual, like, any sort of prediction or how I felt with the NLDS, and that a lot of that had to do with the injuries the Dodgers were dealing with. And Freddie Freeman spraining his ankle and being as limited as he is, like, concerned me. I wasn't sure. Another aspect that I think I hit the nail on the head was I told you guys multiple times, I think the Dodgers, and I think I've said it on these shows, the Dodgers bullpen I thought had better depth, and they were the team, the coaching staff, game planning, all that stuff was better at mixing and matching and getting who they want, the pitchers on who they wanted to face with the Padres lineup. And I think we saw that bear out over the final 2 games.
Yeah, it's funny that you mentioned the coaching staff because, we're going to get into some Dave Roberts stuff here in a little bit as we do our predictions for the Mets series. But it's so funny to me that everybody wants to get rid of Dave Roberts. And my question has always been, okay, who's going to replace him? And you watch a guy like Mike Shildt, who I think a lot of people around the league seem to respect. Like, I don't think I've seen Dodger fans clamoring for them to hire Mike Shildt, but he's not a bottom 3rd manager, I don't think, in most people's minds. He was kind of a disaster in this series. Like, there were 3 or 4 decisions that he made that I thought were just outright terrible. And so to see the opposition on the other side and to say, well, I mean, like, again, here's an option if you were to get rid of Dave Roberts. Like, here's what the alternative might look like. I just thought it was interesting to watch. I'm with you. My bold prediction, I think, at the beginning of the season was about this bullpen, and I lost I wouldn't say I lost faith. I definitely lost some confidence and boldness with that take, but I always felt like if they got healthy, they had a bunch of guys you could trust. And that wasn't even including guys like Bonda or even Daniel Hudson, who I didn't know if he was going to be able to come back. But I've been consistent with trying in. Evan Phillips, I believed in. Vesia, I believe in. And so overall, I'm with you. Like when you step back and you say, starting pitching, I think the advantage was clearly going to be for the San Diego Padres. I think it bore itself out. I mean, just Yu Darvish alone was an upgrade, although Yamamoto making a good start sort of saved that. But offense and the bullpen, clear wins for the Los Angeles Dodgers. Coaching, clear win for the Los Angeles Dodgers. And so here we are talking about the NLCS, and that's a good place to be, Matt, looking ahead to the New York Mets. And it's crazy because here we are on Saturday night. They just won on Friday night. Tomorrow night, Sunday night, is when the NLCS starts. NLCS starts. And again, this isn't the team anybody expected. I think everybody that was filling out a bracket had the Phillies advancing on the other half of this. But here are the Mets, who needed to win on not even the final day of the season, the day after the final day of the season, just to make the postseason. They're one of the hottest teams in baseball. They won 20 of 29 to close out the regular season. And this is a team that is worse. I think even as hot as they've been, they are worse than the Padres, who were actually the hottest team in baseball in the second half. But it's not a team to be taken lightly.
No, definitely not. And you like you said, this isn't the opponent that many were predicting would be in the NLCS. And to quote Max Muncy, there's about 80% of people that probably had the Padres and Phillies in the NLCS, but not me. That couldn't be me. Never would be. But to your point about the Mets, this series is going to be interesting to me, and I know we're going to get into a lot of different talking points and angles. The Mets are the proverbial hot team in the playoffs right now, right? Like that, a team always gets hot, and I don't want to say it gets hot late in the season because it extends further for the Mets. I think since either June 1st or like June 12th, there's some, I don't want to say arbitrary date, but there's some specific date that since from that point on, they had like the best record in baseball. So the Padres were the best team after the All-Star break. The Dodgers were, I think, second or third right after them.
Yeah.
The Mets, if you move that date up a little bit more, they were the best. They had the best record in baseball. And so now, the Dodgers are in another position where they need to, be the underdog again and upset the Mets in the NLCS. And if that story sounds familiar, it's not just from a round that the Dodgers just played. It goes back to 1988 when the Dodgers and Mets played in the NLCS. And of course, we know how that season ended. And I don't want to give away my full prediction, but I think we could be looking at a repeat of 1988 this year.
Wow. There we go. I like what you're saying there. So the Oakland A's, you've got the A's at some point coming through on the other side.
Yeah, the A's are walking through that door.
Yeah, to go back to the numbers you were mentioning. So since August 29th, they had a 9-game win streak starting on August 29th that kickstarted a 20-9 stretch to close the regular season. Think about this. On August 14th, the Mets were 3 games above 500. August 14th is pretty late in the season to be hovering around 500. They go on an incredible run. They beat the Brewers. They beat the Phillies. They obviously beat the Braves just to get into the postseason. So I put together, we got a lot of questions last night. Hey, what about the Mets? Talk to me about the Mets. And I was like, I'll be honest. I've spent all my time focusing on the Dodgers and the Padres. I'll get to the Mets. Well, I've gotten to the Mets, Matt, and I know you're a numbers guy. So I've got 5 stats to know about the New York Mets. All right. You ready for these? This first one, I think, is a number you're going to be okay with. There are some lowercase, uppercase, plus signs at some point in here, but the first one I think you're going to like. And it's highlighting a difference between what the Mets are versus the team they just faced in the Padres, and it's walk rate. Okay. The Mets in all of these seasons are 7th in Major League Baseball in their walk rate. The Padres were 26th. So the Mets are a team that is going to force the Dodgers to go deeper into counts. They're going to take more walks than the Padres did. And so that's one thing just to keep an eye on for Dodgers starting pitchers, relief pitchers, is they're not facing quite as aggressive, quite as put the ball in play a team as the Padres. So again, Mets are 7th in walk rate compared to the Padres, who are 26th. If you want to talk about that hot start we mentioned, the Mets had the 26th best ERA in the first half of the season. They had the 4th best ERA in the second half of the season. So you want to say, well, what got better? Their offense actually got worse in the second half of the season, but their pitching dramatically improved. And it might not be names that scare you in the same way that, even Yu Darvish and Dylan Cease and those types of names scare you, Michael King. But these are guys that are hot. And as we saw with the Diamondbacks a year ago, that's all that matters. So there's number 2. Number 3, the bullpen had the 11th best ERA in the second half of the season. The 6th best FIP, which I know you love FIP. You love some prediction stats. So according to some of the metrics, again, this is a very good bullpen, not as good as the Dodgers, but second half of the season has been a very good bullpen. Here's 2 more stats that I find super interesting, and then I'll let you react to which of these stands out to you. Against left-handed hitters, they had the 21st best ERA. So lefties teed off on the Mets. Righties, they were 9th best against righties. So you look at a Dodgers lineup, you look at who's hitting from the left-hand side. Those might be some guys when we make some predictions for biggest swing, X factor, pinch hit, etc. Lefties might be the type of players that you choose. Here's the last one. This is the one I find most interesting. The Mets were the 4th best offensive team, according to weighted runs created plus, against left-handed pitching this season. So let me say that again. They were the 4th best team against left-handed pitching this season. The Padres were 18th for context. So there were lots of times when the Dodgers went to Banda or they went to Vesia in a big spot against a lefty, and it was an obvious situation and they got out. But listen to this. Iglesias, Winker, Vientos, Lindor, Marte, Martinez, Alvarez, Alonso, Nimmo, Taylor. Every single one of those guys is league average or better against left-handed pitching. So they don't have a single guy in the lineup that it's like, oh, here's the obvious spot for Vesia. Here's the obvious spot for Banda. Something to keep in mind. Now, Vesia, pretty good against righties and lefties, basically the same numbers. Anthony Banda was not. So that's a lot of numbers that I'm throwing at you, Matt. I'll recap this. They walk a lot more than the Padres do. They're really good against left-handed pitching, way better against lefties than the Padres were. Their pitching is much better in the second half of the season than it was the first half. They struggle pitching against left-handed hitters, so Dodgers lefties could be in for a good series, and their bullpen, I would say, is good, but not great. So, of those 5, does anything jump out to you?
I think their success against left-handed pitching.
Yeah.
And it's obviously of note. I see people asking us for a Vesia update. We are going to get to that. The gist of it is, not good news for him. So if the Dodgers were ever going to have a series where maybe they're short one of their left-handed relief pitchers, this would appear to be the one. And, that could end up sort of neutralizing. And like you said, Vesia, not that you would have preferred I don't want to sit here and say the Dodgers would have been better off if Anthony Banda was injured instead of Vesia, just because that's not how we do things.
Yeah, you don't get to choose these things.
But, not having, Vesia does, as much as he is kind of a neutral guy and the Dodgers just trust him. Yes, they tried to match him up against a left-handed hitter if it makes sense, but we've seen Dave Roberts use him kind of just in a high leverage situation, regardless of what point of the order is coming up. So I think, that should bode well for the Dodgers because like I said, it's likely that they're not going to have their full complement of southpaws out of the bullpen.
Yeah, and again, it's not to say these guys all stink against right-handed pitchers, but it's just interesting because against the Padres, if Jackson Merrill came up, you're like, oh, perfect spot for a lefty. Here's the guy that you go and get the lefty. And it seems in general like there are a lot of series like that. And it's not to say some of these guys aren't worse against lefties than they are against righties. I just found it interesting that every single guy that started game 4 of the NLDS for the Mets is league average or better against left-handed pitching this season. So to your point, maybe that lessens the blow of a guy like Vesia, who we'll get into a little bit, but that's sort of the highlight of the Mets. And I think ultimately, Matt, all those stats aside, it comes down to how much do you believe in momentum? I mean, I really think that's the conversation as we sit here before the NLCS. We've seen it with the Diamondbacks, average team who gets hot, makes it all the way to the World Series. And so there's a case to be made, well, they're hot, momentum, etc. On the flip side, we also saw in a Dodgers-Padres series moments when it felt like it was obvious which team had momentum, and yet it was the other team that ended up, with like winning the next game, so to speak. So Mets had a couple extra days off. Is that good news? Is that bad news? Like, what do you believe about a team like the Mets who is less talented than the Dodgers? I think even starting pitching-wise, they're probably better than the Dodgers just because of the way things set up and how guys have been pitching. But offensively, the Dodgers are better. Relief pitching, the Dodgers are better. Managerially, the Dodgers are better. Team experience, the Dodgers are better. Like, it feels on paper like this is a heavily advantaged Dodgers series. Do you buy into that?
Yes. I think what momentum can do in this type of situation with the Dodgers and a team like the Mets is, look, I don't think I'm going out on a limb by saying the Dodgers would appear to be the more talented team, right?
Yeah.
Like, It's not a
Some of the
stretch.
computer stuff, like the projections, which I know you love, had the Dodgers at somewhere between like a 65 to 70% chance of winning this series, just based on like simulations and talent and whatever. The spreadsheet nerds, as Matt would like to say 65 to 70% chance the Dodgers win.
Which is impressive because the Dodgers are going up against Cohen money, which, Guggenheim doesn't have. Cohen's in his own stratosphere.
Yeah, the small payroll Dodgers, the Mets out here just trying to buy World Series. Dodgers are trying to bootstrap it.
Exactly. I lost my train of thought for a split second. We were discussing
Mets,
momentum.
Like
momentum.
being the hot team.
I think what it can do in a series like this with these two teams specifically is keep a team like the Mets, who, maybe don't have as much talent, still, more competitive than maybe you would see like during the regular season when, maybe they don't have this same kind of momentum and confidence. And I saw somebody mention earlier, kind of downplaying, the Mets being a hot team and just something I forgot what the specific comment was. That, like, if you want to question it, fine, but also like against the Brewers, they were losing in the 9th inning and Pete Alonso hit that home run. So it's not like there is a little something to what they have accomplished, and certainly some good fortune. I think every team needs that. I mean, look, if Mookie's home run in Game 3 Game 3 is caught, like, are we having a different discussion? Like, you need a little bit of luck, right? And Profar was right. Like, that was arguably an easier play for Profar than the one he made the night before. So, you do, like, there is some good fortune. There is also, I do believe in momentum. I know I saw Blake in here. He's somebody who strongly disagrees with any concept of momentum and clutch. But, Jeff, I know you've been dying to say it. I apologize. I'm going to get it out first. Keektober showed us that clutch does exist once again. But yeah, I think you could also argue though that the Dodgers have some momentum as well with needing to, their backs were against the wall twice. One of them, yes, the deck was a little bit more evenly stacked with the Padres because for the Padres Game 5, if they lost that, then they were eliminated as well. Whereas in Game 4, Dodgers are on the road, coming off a loss, looking like a repeat of 2022. Looking like another NLDS exit like the past 2 years. Like a lot of things were stacked against them, and they put together a dominant performance, arguably rode that momentum into Game 5. And so, now they have reason to be feeling good about themselves as this good underdog October story.
Let me ask you this, because this was the thought that popped into my head. And I think it's because I've been doing this for a little while now. I almost sort of move into the future and think what the storylines could be if the Dodgers win, if the Dodgers lose. Like, what are the things we're talking about in hindsight that maybe we can have our eyes open to now? And I was thinking about last night. Alex Vesia pitches. He gets one out. He leaves the mound jumping and screaming and losing his freaking mind. He comes out, he gets hurt. And regardless of the injury, setting the injury aside for a second, I had the thought of like, I don't know how effective Vesia is going to be in the second inning, because I don't know if your body can take the adrenaline spike that he allowed himself to take by screaming and jumping off the mound after getting that out, sitting down for 20 minutes and then coming back and trying to be equally as effective and equally as fired up as he was. And I wondered if there's a parallel there between the Dodgers winning Game 5 against the Padres, this team that's like, a rival that nobody wants to call a rival, a team that's owned them, that's really emotional. Like, do you have any fear that the emotional toll of beating the Padres is actually going to extend into the future and drag the Dodgers down? Not to the point that it will be the reason they lose, but could you see there being an emotional letdown in Game 1, in Game 2 even, because of this? Or is it the opposite, where the monkey is off of their back of the Padres and they've kind of already met, or they haven't met people's expectations, but they've kind of cleared the hurdle of they've accomplished something. And so the season won't be a failure no matter what. And there's almost a freedom that they play with now that they were incapable of playing with. Like, I could see the narrative being one of those two things. And I'm curious which of those two you feel like, having been around this team last night and into the future, might be more relevant.
The Dodgers impressed me with their performance in the NLDS. So that being said, like, when what's interesting, and I know I'll tease the audience that we have an interview tomorrow morning with David Vassay, so that'll be up at some point in the morning.
Drink your coffee before that bad boy hits your screens. That's all I'm going to say.
I want to get his insight because there's been a lot of discussions about this Dodgers team being different, and players have said it. Dave Roberts has said it. Andrew Friedman has said it. And what's interesting to me is there are a lot of holdovers from the past 2 years, 3 years, 4 years type thing. And so I'm wondering, like, there is this newfound, attitude, edge, focus, whatever you want to call it. Is it just as simple as adding new blood in the form of Shohei Ohtani and Teoscar Hernandez, who both exhibit some emotion, when
Jack
things
Flaherty.
they're not Jack Flaherty. Is that part of it? Because this team, like, if this was last year's team, I don't know if they come back from a 2-1 deficit in the NLDS again. Like, I'm not sure. And so because of that, I'm inclined to believe that they're going to ride the wave from the NLDS rather than kind of the more human nature, probably more common response of having the letdown in game one. Now, I think, would I be shocked if they're a little sluggish in the first 2 innings? Not necessarily. Like, they may need a jolt, but I think that jolt could just as well come from Jack Flaherty going 3 up, 3 down in the first inning. Or, if he allows a hit, getting a double play to end the inning type thing. Or, having 2 clean innings to maybe buy the Dodgers a little bit of time if there is some of the carryover. But what I saw from this team the past 2 games of the NLDS, I'm more inclined to believe that we will see them build on what they've accomplished. And look, Muncy was very clear about his feelings and of the perception of the team. Kike Hernandez, we saw what he said. So I think that if I had to pick between the two, I'll say, no, they build on what they accomplished in the NLDS. They understand that as much as maybe they needed to clear that mental block by getting past the division series and the Padres specifically, they recognize that, and they had the Kobe quote up in the clubhouse that the job's not finished.
Yeah. And I think, even as I ask this question, looking ahead, I feel like what always happens is we play the results. Like, I even see Blake talking about intensity, and Blake and I have had this debate before. I think intensity is 100% playing the results. When they lose, it's like they weren't intense enough. And when they win, it was because they were intense enough. And I've said before, you look more intense when you're winning baseball games than when you're losing baseball games. And so I think those are the 2 pathways. And I have a feeling that one of those 2 things is going to be a talking point a week, 10 days from now, is that we're going to look back and say, oh, wow, this team was like the monkey off their back and they played loose. Or, oh man, they were sluggish. They felt like the mission had already been accomplished by beating the Padres. They were mentally drained and they were tired. Like, what's the difference between tired and loose? Those 2 things, I think, look very similar on a baseball field. It's just a matter of, does the ball die at the warning track or does the ball end up in the second row? Second row means you played loose. Warning track means you played tired. And so that's my personal view on these things. But it's just something I was thinking about as I watched Vesia come off the mound. And as I reflected back on that moment, is like, man, I wonder if the Dodgers are like the reliever that jumped off the mound in the 7th. And then now they have to come back out for the 8th and possibly 9th. Now, I think they're more talented than the Mets, so it might not matter. But it's just where my mind went last night.
Yeah, it's fair. And I think to Vesia, I know we're kind of discussing in broader terms than kind of team and generalizing it.
Yeah.
To Vesia specifically, that's who he is. And he has learned to really manage it and control it. And he was asked about that because he had a similar reaction in game 4. And in the clubhouse, one of the reporters asked him, and he said, what I do, once I get into the dugout, I just focus on my breathing techniques and kind of settle myself, get the heart rate back down, look ahead to who's coming up, and then start game planning and scouting again. So he does have control over it. And like I said, I think the Dodgers as a team should probably end up being, I think this team, for whatever reason, if you want to call it edge, focus, intensity, there does appear to be something different. I did think a lot of it was kind of talking, and to your point, maybe some of it is playing the results a little bit, because had they lost in 5 games, although once they got it to the way they performed, what changed it for me, honestly, was game 4.
Yeah.
And
you could even make the case game 3 going down 6-0 and hitting the grand slam.
Great
I think,
point. Yeah, great point. And even though the at-bats went completely quiet after Teoscar's grand slam, to even kind of string that inning together to be in a position where Teoscar hit the grand slam to really cut into the deficit, that was impressive.
Yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely. We appreciate everybody joining us, even Antonio, who hates me and Matt, but we appreciate you for being in here, Antonio. Rod says it's impossible to predict baseball. Impossible. I agree with you. When I say the Dodgers are better than the Mets, I am not penciling in the Dodgers. If you watch this show at all, you know I take literally nothing for granted in the postseason. And we've said it before. The Diamondbacks were not good last season. I will stand by this. I will die on this hill for as long as I live. Brandon Pfaadt was not a good pitcher. He became a good pitcher for like a month. And so therefore, Rod, I agree. It is impossible to predict baseball. It is impossible. And yet, here we are. We could sit here and say, well, who knows what's going to happen? It's impossible. We're going to give our opinions. Some of them are going to be right. Some of them are going to be wrong. Did you have a take, by the way, Matt, in the NLDS that in hindsight you look back and be like, that was a good take? I mean, obviously your series prediction / not prediction was incorrect, but did you have any sense of the NLDS that you look back and said, yep, I knew this one?
I feel like I might have called Kike doing something, maybe even Teoscar at some point. I lost track of maybe when, like, I don't know if those were game specific or series specific. I do think probably the one that I was most consistent about, both leading into the NLDS and then during it, was that I felt that the Dodgers bullpen, as much as the Padres group of relievers was getting a lot of attention, and fine, deservedly so, they made the big splash. Those guys are talented as well. They drive Benzes also, as Mookie Betts would say.
That's the quickest way to start an argument between me and Blake, is to bring up that quote and our feelings on it. I'm in the minority on that one, but anyways, move along.
I felt that the Dodgers bullpen had better depth, and again, like I mentioned in the opening of the show, the coaching staff and the players, to their credit, were flexible enough to basically be thrust into kind of, if Blake Trinan's group of hitters that the Dodgers want to match him up on come up in the 5th inning, was going to be ready. Like, it didn't need to be the 8th inning, and so I feel like that's probably the one that I hit on the most.
I love it. All right, let's talk injury updates, because that's the biggest storyline on the Dodgers side of things. Obviously, we got some updates from Dave Roberts. We got some non-updates from Dave Roberts as well. The biggest one is Alex Vesia. You kind of hinted at it. It appears, Matt, as if he comes out of the game. Let me say this. He comes out of the game and NLDS Game 5. After the game, it sounded like they were downplaying it. Oh, it's minor. No big deal. No big deal. Today, they were not downplaying it. Intercostal, I believe, is the word. I have no idea what that is, but that's a thing. And it appears he's going to be out for the NLCS, potentially longer.
Yeah, so I mean, to your first point of them downplaying it after Game 5, I think you and I have certainly done this long enough. I know a lot of our followers have tracked things long enough as well to know that the Dodgers / Dave Roberts / Alex Vesia calling it a cramp initially was like, yeah, okay. Like, Dave did say that, he did need to get an MRI, and I don't think he dropped a "we're hopeful," but actually he might have literally said, "We're hopeful it's not going to be anything more than a cramp."
That'd be on brand.
I think he might have said, "We're hopeful it's not an oblique or intercostal," which ended up being not oblique but intercostal. So it's his side. Dave said he's highly unlikely to be on the roster for the NLCS. So, I mean, that's, I think, at 99%, unless short of
Blake
Vesia.
said he said that fingers crossed. He wasn't hopeful. He was crying. He was crossing his fingers. Old school.
Okay.
Old school approaches to medicine here.
There we go. Short of, I guess, Vesia making a pretty miraculous recovery, I wouldn't anticipate him being on the NLCS roster.
Okay, we'll get into the ramifications of that. The other big injury update. I mean, there's the Freddie Freeman injury update, which is he's hurt and he's going to continue playing, I assume is the expectation. Miguel Rojas is the other one. Obviously not in the lineup for Game 5. Based on the quotes, what we've heard, is he going to be playing baseball or poker this week? Or both?
Miguel Rojas, I think, will be watching a lot of baseball this series. I don't see him being on the roster. I don't see a significant need for Miguel Rojas on the roster right now. And it's a lot of that's a testament to Tommy Edman, and again, for October being Kike Hernandez's month.
Yeah.
I think we're at a point where if Kike is not in the lineup every game, or 2 out of every 3 games, like the Dodgers can't wait until they're facing elimination to decide, oh, let's put one of our most clutch hitters. Yeah. Most clutch hitters into the lineup tonight, because hey, if we lose, we go home. So I imagine that we're going to see a lot of Tommy Edman playing shortstop, Kike Hernandez in the outfield. And so because of that, like Miguel Rojas, like he's limited too. If his range isn't there, we saw, I don't think range was necessarily a factor on that play he tried to make in San Diego, but he clearly aggravated it. He can't really run the bases, even though he did some of it during tonight's workout. I just don't see a scenario where it makes sense to keep him on. And he's been open about how painful his injury is, and that like it's not a straight, like it's a full blown tear that needs he already knows it needs off season surgery. And so credit to Rojas for trying to push through it. I think we're at a point right now where like the Dodgers can take half a step back and say, look, like we don't necessarily need you to do that right now.
Yeah. We'll pause this real quick. We got a super chat from Jose going back to the question I was asking about the emotional letdown. He says, I remember the intense series versus the Braves in 2020. They go on to win the World Series, which is a great point because that was obviously they were down 3-1. They win 3 straight to win the NLCS. There was no letdown in the World Series. So hopefully this is a precursor, a parallel universe to the 2020 universe. We can only hope. So Jose, great point. We appreciate the super chat. Dodger Gal with the super chat as well. Would you agree that the bullpen is quote quote lights out right now because they have been so heavily worked and therefore battle tested this season? What do you think, Matt? Do you think sort of the amount of energy that the bullpen has had to exert is the reason that they are kind of firing on all cylinders right now?
Not necessarily. I think it's more of kind of the approach the Dodgers took throughout the year of using guys in different innings, different scenarios and stuff like that, and not getting, so hung up on, and as much as I didn't always agree with it, like not having a set closer all the time, even though it was, but wasn't Evan Phillips. And then it was, but wasn't Michael Kopech for separate stretches of the year.
Daniel Hudson was a closer for a little while.
But not officially. He just kept getting all the save opportunities.
For a month, got every ninth inning with under a 3-run lead.
Yeah. So I think it's more that because, throughout in terms of workload, like if the Dodgers had it their way, they would not have used their bullpen as much as they needed to throughout the season. Like that was very much a byproduct of all the injuries to the starting rotation. And then we saw, different guys, Brent Honeywell come up who may factor into things now all of a sudden in October. We saw a bunch of different guys coming up and spending time with the team because they were then trying to figure out, okay, we can't keep running Daniel Hudson out there for 3 months in a row and Blake Treinen for 2 months in a row and stuff like that. And I think the other factor to this is a lot of the players in that group are just, as Dodger Gal mentioned, battle tested in their own right from prior postseason experience.
That was going to be my point. You've got guys like Treinen, Phillips, Kopech being the exception, but even Vesia. These are all guys that have Daniel Hudson, of course. They've pitched in huge moments before. So none of this is new to them. Obviously, Kopech, it's new. Bonda, it's new. But for most of these guys, they're just dudes that have been there, done that, and you can trust them. And so I think that's part of it. But I do think, I would almost go the opposite direction, Dodger Gal, and kind of what you said. Like, I think the Dodgers managed Blake Treinen, Daniel Hudson really well down the stretch, giving them IL stints, giving them time off to be able to say, hey, what we really are worried about is that you guys are available and functioning on all cylinders now. And that has been rewarded. So for all the crap that this group has taken for the way that they've handled pitchers, I think you do have to give them some credit, Matt, for the way that the bullpen has been managed. And so transitioning off of that back to our conversation of injuries, Vesia not expected to be on the roster. Rojas not expected to be on the roster. What's your expectation for where they go to replace Vesia? We know Michael Grove is out for this series because of his injury and being taken off the roster. So if everybody stays the same, if Kasparius is in for Grove and Vesia is off, do they go wild card with a lefty and a guy like Justin Robleski, who I think there's maybe one other guy, I'm blanking, Brogdon? There's some other lefty on the 40-man roster, but not a guy we've seen in like 6 months, blanking on his name, but irrelevant. Or is Joe Kelly back in the mix? Is Brusdar Graterol going to be healthy? Is it Tony Gonsolin? Or is it a guy that you mentioned, Brent Honeywell, who's kind of stayed around the team, has been pitching in simulated games, and to be honest, who was pretty dang effective when called upon in the regular season?
Yeah, Brogdon throws with his right hand, so he wouldn't be. He's not the reliever you're thinking. I'm looking at their 40-man. I'm not sure.
Maybe I'm crazy.
Yeah, I'm really only seeing Robleski, who would potentially be an option. But I do think that Honeywell is the most likely candidate to your question.
Oh, Logue. What's that guy's name?
Oh, that's right. Yeah, no,
we don't need to spend more than 1 second mentioning his name and moving on. So go ahead.
Yeah, remember we text. Well, fine, yeah, I'll leave it alone. If he's on the roster, then I'll bring it back. We'll revisit that.
Yeah.
Graterol and Kelly, they won't be on the NLCS roster.
Is Kelly hurt?
He is. He got hurt during the week of workouts leading up to the NLDS. And at that time, Dave said, obviously, no NLDS. I think he might have even said the NLCS probably was out of the equation as well. He confirmed that tonight during the Dodgers' first and only NLCS workout before the series begins, because as you mentioned, they went the distance in the NLDS. So the penalty for that is no rest for the weary, if you will. So Graterol and Kelly are both off the table for the NLCS as well.
Okay.
I see Laura joking that Kelly is hurt. Wink. No, I think it's legitimate, because if the Dodgers love them some Joe Kelly, he absolutely would have been on the NLDS roster.
Yeah.
So
guys that are not that we haven't mentioned, who are technically available, not on the injured list to be picked, would be Nick Frasso, who we know is hurt, Graterol, who you mentioned is hurt, Michael Grove, who is hurt, Honeywell, who's an option, Kyle Hurt, who is hurt, Joe Kelly, who is hurt, Logue, who is just not very good, and then Robleski. I mean, so it's basically Honeywell and Robleski are the only two guys left standing, unless I'm missing somebody here, right?
Yeah, I mean, I see Root Street.
Bobby Miller is technically an option. I mean, hey, never mind. I'm not going to entertain that. Go ahead.
Tony Gonsolin, who I've seen a few people mention, could conceivably be another option. Dave was asked about Gonsolin. He said no at first. Then in that same breath said, well, I digress. Yes, he is also an option we'll consider. Again, I still think Honeywell is probably the favorite. Honestly, it seemed like every single off day / workout that the Dodgers had during the NLDS, Honeywell was on the mound facing some rotation of hitters in live BP. So he's certainly been throwing. Amanda Z is asking about Ben Kasparius.
And this is assuming that Enriquez, Kasparius remain on the roster.
Right. And I mean, so yes, Kasparius finished the NLDS on the roster, but it's sort of like the Dodgers don't really have a roster right now, right? Like technically speaking. But to your point, I would anticipate that he remains on it. I mean, the Dodgers are running short on options in their bullpen with the different injuries and stuff that are coming up. So yeah, I think Honeywell is definitely the favorite to kind of, if you guys are joining us, like just sort of recap. Joe Kelly, Brusdar Graterol, not in the picture. Alex Vesia, probably not available. And so that then opens the door for, like I said, somebody like Honeywell, or maybe they will surprise us and go Justin Robleski. But to your point, like considering Robleski's
against the Mets.
Right. And considering Robleski's struggles, like, is he the best matchup is he the best option for this series? Probably not.
Yeah.
So
I honestly think if there's a decision that's being made, it's probably not Honeywell. I wonder if there's a Kasparius versus Gonsolin conversation happening, because if you need a second guy that you want to piggyback, or if you need length or something like that, I just wonder if that's more of the conversation. It's okay. Well, Honeywell's in for Vesia, move along, relief pitcher. We need him. But for the second quote unquote long / bulk guy, is it a guy like Tony Gonsolin, who presumably could give you 3 innings? Or is it a guy like Kasparius, who is in that same role of starter turned relief pitcher?
It's interesting. It's an interesting point. And I think still where Kasparius might have the leg up, even though when Dave was asked about Gonsolin tonight, we do have that video up on our YouTube channel. So definitely once we're done here, check that out. You could hear everything Dave had to say.
Yeah.
He did specifically highlight Gonsolin's pitch mix as matching up well with the Mets. And so it's possible, but I still am not sure that the Dodgers are going to go down that route and have Gonsolin's 2024 debut come in the playoffs. Like, look,
who also has not been good in the postseason in his career either, by the way.
Right. Although I will say, and I know that you're not disagree. You wouldn't disagree. I think some of that has to do with the Dodgers and how they sort of yo-yoed him a lot.
100%.
But yes, I mean, the fact of the matter is it's not like he's been dominant in the postseason. You can kind of say, well, in 2020 or 2021, like he was this great option for us. Let's just hope he could reprise that. Like, yeah, it hasn't been great for him in a relatively small sample size, admittedly. But I still would be shocked if his 2024 debut comes now, like in the NLCS, where like it's a playoff, so stakes are relatively even, but you're in the next round. Like the NLCS obviously just feels more intense, right? You're closer to the World Series. It feels like there's more at stake at this point. And so because of that, I don't see the Dodgers going down that path.
And look, I think at the end of the bench, you've got a lot of, you could make a compelling case why it doesn't make sense for a bunch of these guys. I see a lot of people saying like, really, Gonsolin's first appearances of 2024 is going to be in the postseason. It's like, okay, Kasparius, Enriquez, like these are guys that made 2 career major league appearances before. Enriquez gave up 2 home runs in the 1 inning he pitched in the playoffs so far. So like all of these guys I think have warts, but I ultimately would land on, because they have a guy like Landon Knack, I don't think there's a need for a guy like Tony Gonsolin. And so at that point, if you're talking relief pitching wise, a Casparius Enriquez would probably be higher on my depth chart from Gonsolin. I'm just throwing out there, if it's Gonsolin instead of Casparius, I would not be shocked, nor would I be surprised. And so something to keep an eye on. On the Rojas side, I think you and I are very much aligned. We talked, Anthony and I, on our post-game show last night about what the roster was going to be. And I said, hey, Andy Pages closing out games in center field because Chris Taylor was having to close out games in left field, and because Kike Hernandez was having to close out games in the infield, was not something I was super fired up about. And everybody knows I'm not the biggest Kiermaier fan, but Anthony and I both said, if like Kiermaier doesn't have a spot on this roster, ... unless Rojas is hurt. Now it sounds like Rojas may not be available. If Rojas is off, is it a slam dunk that is Kevin Kiermaier? I mean, like I've seen people in the chat. Look, I'm a James Outman guy. I can't see a single world where James Outman makes this roster ahead of Brent Honeywell. Although lefties hitting against the Mets, who knows? But is it as simple as, if Rojas is off, Kiermaier is on?
I think that's pretty straightforward. Me personally, and I know if Blake is still in here, I'm going to have to hear it on how Kiermaier's.
No, it doesn't count. Blake and Scott don't get to take a victory lap on Kiermaier making an NLCS roster if it's because somebody's hurt. That doesn't count.
No, not that. Kiermaier is one of the best center fielders we've ever seen, and this and that.
The ball knowers, Matt. It's the ball knowers.
Kiermaier is better than Outman defensively. Like, I'm not gonna argue that. I think, though, the difference offensively between Outman and Kiermaier is greater than the difference defensively.
I love it.
And so
you said it, not me.
To me, considering that, I would roll the dice on getting yes, in a perfect world, Kiermaier plays as a defensive replacement and he's in the field and maybe he's not getting a ton of at-bats. But to your point, when he came in, well, when it was Pages, like if Kiermaier comes in that type of situation, it was only a 2-0 game. Like a base hit and a home run, and all of a sudden it's tied. And what if that spot then comes up? Like, would you want Kiermaier potentially batting, or would you want Outman taking that? And I know that Outman had a rough postseason. Look, the entire Dodgers team had a terrible postseason last year. So how much can you fully hold it against him? That being said, like, I would go Outman, but yes, to your point, I think that if there is any change, if an outfielder is replacing Miguel Rojas on the roster for the NLCS, it will be Kevin Kiermaier. And it's not going to be anything to like rip your hair out over or to kick and scream and say the Dodgers made the wrong choices and that, but I would just lean more Outman than Kiermaier.
And Outman, Hunter Fiducia are the only two guys on the 40-man roster that we haven't mentioned yet. Obviously, Dalton Rushing, because he was in the organization, in theory would be an option. But again, I think the 9th inning of Game 5, when Andy Pages is the defensive replacement in center field, tells you everything you need to know about, well, Kevin Kiermaier would be that guy. And hey, some people saying, Kiermaier got a bunt down. There you go. Maybe he's the guy that you pinch bunter as well. So there you go. I think that's what would happen. Let's shift gears here. We got some super chats as well. Rod, who said it's impossible to predict baseball, says trying to predict baseball is fun. Go Dodgers. We appreciate that. Tim asks, and I think this is a perfect question to ask after the conversation we just had. What's the Dodgers starting lineup against left-handed pitching? And the reason I say this is perfect is because I think we were all aligned that against left-handed pitching, Kike Hernandez was going to be hitting and playing second base in place of Gavin Lux because of how bad Lux has been against lefties. With Rojas, in theory, we're predicting off of the roster, and Kike Hernandez presumably being the de facto center fielder. Is Kike Hernandez playing second base and Andy Pages playing center field? Or do you think that the jump from Lux against lefties to Pages in the field is big enough to where the Dodgers may just stick with Lux in the starting lineup?
I think this depends on what game in the series we're talking and what the circumstances are. If it's non-elimination, even if it's 2-1 and they potentially go down 3-1, I could see them probably going Pages in center field, Kike at second base.
Okay. I mean, because we've got a righty and a lefty. So game 2 would be the first lefty, Sean Manaea, on the mound. Kodai Senga projected to be the starter. So I'm sorry, as I was looking that up. So against game 2, Manaea on the mound, you've got Pages in center, Kike at second base.
Correct.
Okay. Yeah, it'll be interesting. I would not be surprised if they stuck with Gavin Lux in game 2. Gavin Lux has played pretty good defense in second base. And again, Pages has been a nightmare defensively in center field. And so while it's an obvious upgrade with the bat, I've been arguing that Mookie Betts should play center field against lefties so Pages can play right. That's obviously not going to happen. But we'll see. I think Anthony and I said last night that we think Gavin Lux would be starting every single game if Rojas is in fact off of the roster. As I've had more time to reflect on that conversation, I've kind of waffled a little bit, sat on the fence, if you will, because I do think clearly they've trusted Andy Pages in some big moments, both offensively and defensively. And so I wonder if in game 2, they go to a guy like Pages to start, because then who knows? Then it gives you Gavin Lux, that right-handed bat off the bench. A left-handed bat off the bench if they go to a righty later in the game, which could offer some value. So some interesting stuff to consider, Tim. We appreciate the super chat. Ivan with the super chat as well. We were talking about Joe Kelly. Said, never understood the Joe Kelly love. Directly cost us in 13 and 18. Is it because he made funny faces and almost hit Correa? Still not over 13. Deserved a ring that year. Look, I will never get over the fastball that hit Hanley Ramirez in the ribcage. So, Ivan, I couldn't agree with you more. To answer your question, yes, it's basically exclusively because he made funny faces at Carlos Correa. I think that's almost the entire reason why most Dodger fans like him.
Probably, but there have been significant moments in the playoffs where Joe Kelly has gotten big outs for the Dodgers.
Yeah, it's true. I mean, he's had high moments and had very, very low moments as well. But to your point, 13 and 18 were a long time ago, I think is what most Dodger fans would say. And we're all glad that the 2024 version of Joe Kelly is nowhere to be seen, except for Matt. Matt believed in Joe Kelly. He was ready for Joe Kelly to get big outs for him, huh?
I was. And I'm hoping that the Dodgers, if they advance to the World Series, that they'll get Joe Kelly back for that.
All right, let's talk Yamamoto, because this is a big talking point heading into the NLCS. The Dodgers have a guy who is paid to be a number 1 pitcher, who looked like a number 1 pitcher in Game 5 of the NLDS, Matt. And yet, he is apparently only going to pitch 1 time in the NLCS if the Dodgers hold to their words when it comes to Yamamoto. If you're new here, when he was pitching in Japan, he pitched basically once a week. So he had a full 5 days off in between every start, 6-man rotation kind of a thing. The Dodgers have said that's the plan, period. No ifs, ands, or buts about it. If the Dodgers are committed to giving him 5 days off between every start, it means he would not pitch until Game 4 of the NLCS. He would not be available for 5, 6, or 7. In the World Series, if they were to make it, he could pitch Game 1 and then Game 6, and that would be it. Is there any chance, Matt? Is there any chance at all that the Dodgers adjust this plan a little bit to see if they could get him into a Game 3 and then potentially into a Game 7?
I don't think so. I think maybe if it meant pitching in a Game 3, let me count the days.
Yeah, because Game 3 would be 16, and then Game 7 would be the 21st. So basically, if he were on a normal 5-man rotation schedule, he could theoretically pitch Game 3 and then be available for Game 7 with 4 full days off both of those times. But again, they have said prior, not today, I don't believe they said anything, but a week ago prior to the playoffs, all of that, they've said 5 full days off, no questions asked.
Yeah, Dave, he was asked about it. He didn't say that Yamamoto was locked into Game 4, but he said, yes, the Dodgers are sticking with the schedule that they have laid out. So that suggests Yamamoto won't start until Game 4, and that's all you're going to see him for the NLCS. And so hopefully the Dodgers would advance, and then he gets to pitch again this year. To your original question, I don't see them pushing him up to a Game 5 so that he would then, a Game 3 so that he would then potentially be available for a Game 7. I think if the schedule set up so that there was an extra day of rest that he was going to be able to get before Game 7, I think they would consider that and probably even do it. But they're not going to ask him to adjust his routine to make a start earlier than normal so that he could then potentially make a second start earlier than he's accustomed to.
Matt, what do you say because I see the people in the chat and they're not alone who are very frustrated. They're like, we paid this guy more money than any starting pitcher has ever been paid. And here we are in the postseason, in the NLCS, 1 round away from the World Series, no more than 14 games remaining on the schedule. And you're telling me this guy, who, yes, he's a rookie, but he's 26 years old. He's pitched in Japan professionally for a long time. You're telling me we're not asking him to pitch on 2 days rest or even 3 days rest. We're asking him to pitch on the same number of days of rest that every other starting pitcher in baseball pitches on basically every week of the entire season. What would you say to those people and their frustrations?
That I understand the frustration, but the reality is Yamamoto, up until this year, basically spent his entire career on this certain schedule. And the Dodgers use this entire season basically keeping him on that same schedule, if not giving him another day on top of that whenever possible. And then you layer in that even with all of that, and not that the schedule is to blame, but another reality that the Dodgers are factoring in is that Yamamoto got hurt.
Yeah.
And so is it what I would
like it?
Right. Like, is it what I would prefer for, this ace caliber pitcher that a team signs? Obviously not. I think that this situation is also magnified because of the rash of other injuries that the Dodgers had, which has been extreme. And that's not how much blame the Dodgers deserve for that can be debated. I know that, we've kind of kicked the can around of, hey, like, does their approach need to change? Do they need to stop relying on so many pitchers who have an injury history and, trying to play the percentages of, if 90% of this goes right, then everything is great. Because the reality is, like, that's the odds of that happening aren't very high. But if just one more if Glasnow, and I know our fans may not like it, and or Kershaw were healthy and around, this isn't necessarily that big of a deal. Or even Gavin Stone, and we didn't touch on him fully, but he did have shoulder surgery.
Positive.
Yeah,
out for all of 2025 is the expectation. Gavin Stone.
Until, like Daniel told us, Gavin Stone is out all of next year until the Dodgers start saying maybe he's an option for the playoffs. If one of those three was around, this wouldn't feel like as big of a deal as it is. But the Dodgers, unfortunately, somehow are short on starting pitchers for a third year in a row, arguably in some sense in a worse position than they were last year and the year before. And that's what I think is also fueling a lot of the frustration. Because if they had Glasnow and Flaherty and or Glasnow and Stone to sort of mix and figure out how they fill out the rest of the series, like, people would say, oh, like, Yamamoto should be able to start, but okay, it is what it is. Like, we still have so-and-so to go. But you're looking at a best-of-7 series, and the Dodgers right now are discussing not just only one bullpen game, but potentially two.
Yeah.
And look, we saw it worked in Game 4 against the Padres, so that there is, proof of concept there. But there is. It's also just as easy as one concern with bullpen games is if one or two relief pitchers doesn't have it, then that goes south very quickly.
Yeah, and I see like Mike in the chat saying, if Cease was dumb move on short rest, then they shouldn't do it with Yamamoto. And yes, the number of days in between would be different, but the impact to a guy whose routine is his routine would be essentially the same. And I think you make the great point, which is if they could keep him on his normal rest for Game 4 and then bring him back on a short rest for Game 7, I think it's a different conversation. For him to pitch twice in this series, he would have to pitch on quote-unquote short rest twice in one series. By the way, all of this only matters if the NLCS goes 7 games, which it might, but if he only pitches once in a 5 or 6 game series, that's kind of the norm for most of the starting pitchers. And not to mention, he's the guy that you would want if you make the World Series, taking the ball in game number 1 and being available later in that series as well. And so that's kind of the game that you have to play a little bit here, which is, yes, you're planning for the present, but you're also having to say, we don't want to fire every bullet we have just to make it to the World Series, only to have no starting pitching available. So if the Dodgers can somehow get through the NLCS, which is a huge if, in 5 games or 6 games or even 7 games and only throw Yamamoto once, how awesome are we going to feel 9 days from now, knowing that Yamamoto's taking the ball in game number 1 would be my point.
Yeah, definitely. And the other part to all this too is this is sort of the penalty of going the distance in the series before if you advance. So whether it was Yamamoto or some other pitcher, whoever starts Game 5, which most times you line it up so that it is your ace because it's win or go home, they then are not available until much later into the next round. And in this case, that conceivably would be Game 3 instead of a Game 4. But because of Yamamoto's schedule, again, like, it is unfortunately delayed. And I see, we're getting asked questions about when the bullpen games would be in the Game 2 starter. Dave Roberts said today the Dodgers haven't decided on Game 2 or 3. My guess is if a bullpen game is needed, either game 2 or game 3, that they would probably do game 2 from the standpoint of that then leads into an off day. But the challenge for that, though, is if Flaherty has a short start in game 1, you're going into your bullpen, and then it's a very quick turnaround because game 2 on Monday is at 1:00 in the afternoon in LA. So it's not even, you're not getting a full like back-to-back night games where, okay, pitchers can, kind of recover over a 24-hour period. It's a much shorter start, and that stuff matters.
Yeah, I'm with you. So interesting to note on Yamamoto, and we'll see how it plays out. Some more super chats here from the Philippines. We appreciate it, Miel. Kike in center field, Edmund in shortstop. Thank you for the super chat, and we agree with you. We think that's how this is going to play out. Just about, because we both think Kike is going to be the center fielder every single day if Rojas is off the roster, right?
I would hope so, but I know that I hope the Dodgers don't approach it from Kike isn't looking at my interpretation of their opinion of not viewing Kike as an everyday starter type thing.
Yeah.
And so because of that, is he not going to play every day? But again, like I said, we've seen it enough times in October that, and considering all the injury stuff, like he needs to be in the lineup.
And I would say against lefties, like there's going to be more opportunities for him to be in, which is his day. Against righties, Gavin Lux is going to be playing. And so I would not imagine they go to Pages against righties, who has struggled more against righties. Both those guys, they have a lot of guys. Whoever's playing center field is not going to be on their best side of things, handedness wise, against a right-handed pitcher. And so that's why I think it's going to be Kike every single day. And then it becomes Lux versus Pages against lefties, but we'll see. Laura with the super chat. I'm still on a we beat the loudmouth Padres high, not ready to move on to the Mets. I don't blame you, Laura. I feel you. That's why we started the show with a lot of enjoyment of beating the Padres. I've been a firm believer, Matt, all along, that you have to enjoy your blessings, so to speak. Like, don't just move on and not enjoy the fact that they beat the Padres. A, because tomorrow and the NLCS is not guaranteed, but B, because that was fun and we beat the Padres and it feels good to beat the Padres. And it was a dramatic game and we were all stressed out and they came out on top. And so I agree with Laura here, Matt, that we need to stop and smell the roses, so to speak.
Yeah, definitely. Unfortunately, I felt like the game had a good pace of play, so it wasn't one that dragged it. So it started at 5. That helped. It ended at a reasonable time. So you had most of Friday night to celebrate it. You have all of today to take it in. And I know for Laura, she was stressed throughout the entire series because she has family members who are Padres fans and she was worried about having to hear from them. But yes, once, so take tonight, we still have a couple more hours until it's Sunday, maybe even take a little bit of Sunday morning.
Yeah, you got all morning.
I'll say wait until once the NLCS roster is out from the Dodgers, then at that point, it's time to turn the page and start looking ahead.
Ray with the super chat. Some people forget Yamamoto is a rookie with a 3.00 ERA this season. He will be fine. I don't think anybody, do you feel like, Matt, we've gotten to the point? I asked Anthony this last night. He had a bad start, 3 innings, 5 earned in game 1, and then 5 innings, 2 hits, no earned in game 5. Do you think the game 5 starter we saw from Yamamoto is the guy that we can expect, that you are expecting moving forward? Or is it the more sort of quote unquote obvious answer, which is the real Yamamoto lies somewhere in the middle?
I think somewhere in the middle with the potential, of course, of being, kind of the, I don't know. Can we say it was dominant? Because on one hand, he only held the Padres to 2 hits, but then.
Hold on. Are you going to tell me all the nerd stats, all the peripherals that didn't like Yamamoto's performance last night? The eye test looked pretty good.
I'm just going to relay them because it wasn't something that I really cared. Like, to me, he was,
Nerd Moreno over here. Jeez Louise, what got into this guy?
To me, Yamamoto was out there getting outs, getting big double play when he needed it. So I didn't have any issue, but I saw a lot of other people
were saying that there might be some concern.
Yes, we're saying that he didn't get a lot of swing and miss and he gave up hard hit balls and this and that. And I'm looking at it as, man, that was 5 innings, no runs allowed. Take it and let's go. Like, stop. We don't need to worry about all that other stuff.
I love it. I've heard some other people saying these things that I'm not saying I believe, but I just feel like should be said out loud on the show that maybe, let me ask you this. If we got another 3 inning, 5 earned performance from Yamamoto in the postseason, would you be shocked?
Yes.
Okay. I think that's probably more of it, right? How surprised would you be to see him get shelled? And if we've moved to the place of like, I am expecting 5 innings and 2.5 runs or better, basically, which is, I think, where I'm at. So I would be shocked by a short blow up start from Yamamoto moving forward.
Yeah, I would be. And I think a lot of his struggles again in game one, look, it was his postseason debut. For whatever reason, the Padres seem to potentially have some sort of tell
the team that sees him well.
Yeah, that Yamamoto sort of seems to have against them. But yes, I think he is going to be closer to what we saw in game 5 than in game 1.
Jedi Engineer, thoughts on Padres players not giving our team credit? Jurickson Profar saying the Dodgers relievers deserve no credit. I was told that Tatis and Machado actually did give the Dodgers pitching some credit, that it was just Profar. Is that accurate?
I'm pretty sure I saw a quote from Tatis saying give them credit. I didn't see anything attributed to Machado, but I also didn't do a ton of digging or searching for it.
Sure.
But yes,
the Profar quote was great. There's a great article on DodgerBlue.com with his quotes, and oh my god, I just retweeted. I said the Padres remain on brand. It's like they can't help themselves. He can't help but put his foot just square in his mouth. It's the easiest thing in the world to just say, hey, you know what? They were better than us. They pitched really great. We didn't hit. Instead, it's like, no, had nothing to do with them. We screwed up.
Or even if he would have said it was a little bit of both. They pitched well. Right. We also missed some pitches. Like, I would have been fine with that. But to say that their pitching had no impact, like, come on. And honestly, when I was putting that together, I was surprised that I think Profar had like 4 or 5 hits in the series. I was surprised it was that many because I didn't remember them at all. I thought he was like 2 for something.
Yeah. It's fair. Back to our bullpen conversation. Peyton says, expect long relievers. Kasperius. And this is a big thing, Matt, and I think Peyton's kind of hinting at this. In a 7-game series, things are going to be very different than in a 5-game series. You kind of mentioned, is the bullpen game 2 or 3? 3, 4, and 5 are back-to-back. So it's 3 straight days with games, which is going to impact the way that your bullpen is available. In the NLDS, it's only 2-game stints. So basically, all of your dudes can go back-to-back. And if you can give them one off day on either game 1 or 2 or 3 or 4, you're pretty much golden for the entire series. Not the case for this one. So I think, last round we could say, hey, they've got these 3 starters and these 7 relievers, and that's pretty much it. I think guys 11, 12, and 13 on the pitching staff are actually going to come into play in this series. And I mean, this is a Captain Obvious statement, but far more than they did in the first round.
Yeah, and Dave Roberts said as much tonight, which, again, I mentioned his press conference that we do have up on our YouTube channel, so definitely check that out. That way you don't have to hear just me sort of relaying everything. There are a lot of other topics that Dave discussed, but he did acknowledge that, yes, like the Dodgers are going to need more innings. He didn't specifically say his starters, but I think it was implied that, we can't do any more of, 3-4 inning starts type thing. And, the Dodgers will need maybe not a bulk guy out of their bullpen, but there might be a reliever who needs to go, 2 innings or get 5 outs, and then another who needs to get 4 outs and stuff like that, because he can't be as aggressive, and they can't rely on their bullpen as much as they did, as you said, in the NLDS, where the schedule is a little bit more favorable.
Shelly along these lines with the super chat says, any chance we see Gonsolin or Knack start? Obviously, we talked bullpen games. I think it's a pretty safe bet that Landon Knack is going to be asked to get them 6+ outs at some point in this series. Do you think it's going to be starting in the first inning, or do you think it'll be starting in the second inning?
I think it'd be in the second inning would be the earliest. I think any game that Knack sort of pitches in any sort of bulk role, or however you want to break it down, is going to be following an opener.
But do you agree, like, there will be 1 or 2 games at this point where he is not asked just to get 1 inning, but they're kind of hoping that they can get 2, maybe even 3 or 4 innings out of him?
Yeah, and I think that could factor into, part of their deciding, is the bullpen game 2 or game 3? And if they go game 3, then you're going to need a bulk guy like Landon Knack, because as we just mentioned, the way the schedule is with games 3, 4, and if it goes to 5, being played consecutively. And so how do you kind of alleviate the pressure on the bullpen? You have a pitcher who can go and get you 3, 4 innings.
A couple more super chats here. Stockton says, Padres are a classless organization with a joy to send them home. I agree with you. He has another super chat here. He says, season's still a failure without a ring at the end. Do you still agree with this?
Yes. I mean, look, I'm not like the season for me, and I think we got asked something along these lines. Like the season in my eyes was never, okay, as long as you eliminate the Padres and the NLDS, then who cares what happens after that? The Dodgers aren't in that type of position. They're not some upstart team. Like the Mets, if they lose to the Dodgers in the NLCS, I think their season could be
Right.
maybe not necessarily a success, but it's not viewed as a failure.
Yeah.
Look at how poorly they start. I mean, maybe they would disagree, but considering the start they got off to and where they've ended up, like it's a remarkable turnaround and it deserves a ton of credit. But for the Dodgers, whether it was the Padres or whoever, getting past the NLDS was expected. And fair or not, that's the reality that they live in.
Yeah, you'll love this as a USC fan because I was on a bunch of text
geez.
threads with my Oregon buddies today. No, you actually are going to love this, not hyperbole.
Okay.
And we were talking about like approaching this Ohio State game today, and most of us actually didn't expect the Ducks to win. We thought we were kind of going to get waxed a little bit, like lose by double digits potentially. And yet, even as Ohio State was driving, I had people texting me. I was like, you know what? I'm kind of like impressed that like we played really well, and even if we lose, like so be it. And we were all saying, like, there's no chance Ohio State and Alabama and Georgia fans feel this way. Like, there's never a point in which they're like, hey, you know what? If we lose this game, like, we kind of hung with Ohio State and they're really good and we're banged up and so be it. Like, so it just gave me this moment where I was like, Oregon's one of the best programs and they've been one of the best programs in the world for the last, in the nation for the last 10 years or so. And yet there was still this attitude where we were like, well, we still think about things differently than Bama and Georgia and Ohio State. And that's the Dodgers. Like, I think that's exactly what you just mentioned, is there are teams like the Dodgers who, no matter who they are playing and no matter what round of the postseason they are in, the expectation is win or it's a failure. And there are other teams, which was the Dodgers for most of my childhood and most of my young adulthood, was, man, we made the playoffs. That's awesome. If we win a series, that would be awesome. If we win a playoff game, that would be awesome. And expectations have changed. And so I think the word failure is still a hard word for me because of all the injuries and because they beat the Padres and they made it out of the first round. Like, is there a degree? Is it just black or white, failure or success? Then yes, I agree with you. It's only a success if they win, but there are differing degrees of failure, and they have cleared, in my estimation, the biggest hurdle, which was don't lose to the Padres in the NLDS. Don't lose in the first round yet again. They won the division. They got out of the first round. They beat the Padres. That is not enough for this season to be a success, but I also think it's enough to where like the word failure still seems too harsh for me.
I think that's a good point. And I think applying failure to the circumstances this year probably is too difficult. Disappointment, I think, would maybe be a better term. But yeah, I mean, I think I would argue, though, that at this point, like getting past the Padres, which I know everybody but me was afraid of in the NLDS, I think at this point could be a disappointment if the Dodgers don't finish it with a World Series. Yeah. Whereas whether it was Padres or any other
disappointment
team,
is a word I'm way more comfortable with than failure.
Whether it was the Padres or any other team in the NLDS, if the Dodgers had lost in that round, then this season, injuries or not, I think would have been a failure.
Yeah, I agree. And again, maybe I'm just overreacting to a word in the English language, which is failure. But if you told me disappointment, anything short, if this word was season is still a disappointment, absolutely agree with you. Failure, I think, is just tough when we're talking about like who's going to be the game 3 starter for the Dodgers. And the guys that we're just penciling in 2 and 4 are like Walker Buehler, who, like some people have had some varying thoughts about throughout the season.
Easy. Any Walker Buehler doubt should be out the window at this point.
Hey, look, you're talking to the guy that was fighting back to the Walker Buehler is cooked language at the beginning of the season. All right. So no, I said he was the X factor, and I'm ready to defend that view in the NLDS, Matt. My guy got robbed. I wasn't able to come on the post-game show, but I mean, 5 ground balls and no outs. Like, come on, my dude needs some help. So I went on record last night and said he was going to be my X factor again for the NLCS. I've got him, Kike Hernandez, which is, it feels like an easy choice, ironically enough, because we don't even know if he's going to be playing every day. But Kike Hernandez and Walker Buehler, those were my X factor choices, which I'm going to ask you about in a moment. So save yours for just a little bit. Bob Nightingale says Dodgers in 6 per sources. That was also my prediction last night. So great minds. I don't know if me and Bob Nightingale agreeing on something deserves great minds think alike. And that's more of that has less to do with me and more to do with you, Bob. No offense to the real Bob Nightingale. Stockton says pitching won't hold up against you need a lineup. That's good news because I think the Dodgers lineup is their strength and their offense. He said Yankees. That pitching won't hold up versus Yanks lineup, unfortunately. That's fine. I don't think the pitching didn't hold up against the Padres lineup, and they beat the Padres. So I still think the offense is the strength of this team. And so we're already well over the hour mark. I asked you 6 questions prior to the NLDS, Matt, and I told you I was going to ask you those same 6 again, and then we will get to a couple questions here at the end. but I want to run through these very, very quickly as we preview the NLCS. And somebody could go back and do the math on how we did on the first series. I think I would say I did fairly well. As we go through these, I'll tell you if I remember what my answer was in series number 1. But the first one is this: which Dodgers starting pitcher is going to give us the best start in the NLCS? I said Yamamoto in round 1. That looked really dumb after game 1 and ended up being true after game 5. So he technically gave us the best start, not multiple starts, individual start. If you had to pick Walker Buehler, Jack Flaherty, Yoshinobu Yamamoto, which guy? Some of those guys you might get two swings at the piñata. Which of those 3 do you expect to make the best start for the Dodgers in the NLCS?
I'll go Buehler.
Yes, let's go. He's feeling it. He's feeling it.
I think I'm gonna have to. I need a workshop blending Buehler with October and figure that out, because we've had Beltober, we've had Keektober.
Buehler-ween? What about Buehler-ween? You could do a Halloween, Hall of Buehler. I don't know. We're workshopping it in real time here.
Well, I'll have to figure it out before his start. But I'll go Buehler. I think. Look, I said it when heading into his start against the Padres during the regular season. Like, these big moments, like, these are the games that he sort of gets up for. And I think that type of, to take a phrase from Dave Roberts, that compete. Well, it's, Walktober, that maybe, but it implies walks, nice. And so that
it's true. It has that's a negative connotation.
But if nothing else comes up, then I think we will go with that Hawaiian Kira. I think these are and Buehler was asked as much down in San Diego. The question was, what do you think about your reputation as a big game pitcher type thing? And he said it's all he cares about. And
I love it.
And kind of smiled. And so these are the moments that he wants to be in. He might not have his best stuff, but don't tell him that, because it's not going to matter.
Give me Yoshi. I think Yoshi's far and away their best starting pitcher. Again, Walker Buehler's my X factor, but give me Yoshi for that one. Okay, biggest impact reliever. Again, I said Treinen in this one. Game 1, game 5, felt really great about it. All the relievers were great, but Treinen was great in game 1. So I have Treinen as, I'm going back to the well here. Impact reliever, Blake Treinen. Impact reliever for you is who?
This is a good question. I mean, I don't necessarily want to pick this. I'll go Kopech.
Yeah,
I think we see a lot of him. Tie between Kopech and I'll stick with Kopech, but Evan Phillips is a close second.
Evan Phillips is great. Look, Kopech terrified me coming into the game, but I feel so much better about him moving forward after seeing the way that he looked last night. I'll say that. Biggest hit off the bench is coming from who?
Oh man,
You getting some CT3 magic? You want to take your guy Austin Barnes? Does he even get an at bat at some point in this series?
I mean, hey, they might need Austin Barnes to play second base at some point. Who knows? Man, this is tough off the bench, because I'm assuming Kike is going to be in the lineup at this point on a regular basis.
Safe bet to be a starter most days.
So
I think your choices are Chris Taylor, Andy Pages, and I think you could include Gavin Lux in the mix, because I think there are going to be moments where he's not starting against the lefty and where he could potentially be a guy off the bench, or Kiermaier. If you want to go Kiermaier, I shouldn't keep that one from you.
I'll throw a huge curveball at you. Freddie Freeman.
Wow, pinch hitting.
There's going to be a game or two where maybe his ankle's a little bum. He can't start, but he'll be available to pinch hit.
I love it. I'm going Gavin Lux. Defensive highlight from the Dodgers. There wasn't really an impact defensive play in the first series that I can think of, unless I'm missing something.
The only one that really, at least for now, stands out is when did Freeman didn't play game 4, right? That was when he was scratched.
Right. Yes, he was out game 4.
So bottom of the first of that game, Muncy had to make a diving play to his right. Yeah. And I remember thinking, if that was Freeman at first base, that ball, and not because I don't think of him in high regard defensively, but he's just so limited right now.
Right.
He probably would have made that play, but that's the only one that really stands out. There's nothing too crazy. I'll go Mookie. I think maybe he either throws someone out or makes, a running catch or a diving catch or something like that.
That was my prediction. I'll stick with it. Again, he didn't make an impact. He didn't make any mistakes. I want to give Kike credit. I thought he made 2 plays look very easy in the 9th inning of game 5 that very easily could have bounced off a glove at third base. The biggest swing overall. So it doesn't have to be a pinch hit, but which Dodgers player has the biggest hit of the NLCS?
Give your guy some love. I'll go Will Smith.
Wow, there we go. furthest home run of the postseason. Shout out to my guy.
And that was he crushed that thing. I mean,
Yeah,
that
he's
I
back.
don't know. I've been to a lot of games at Petco. I don't think that I've seen one travel that far to center specifically.
Yeah. No, I joked with my family. Again, I was camping and I said, man, Mookie hits a home run, Smith hits a home run, Lux hits a home run, and I don't get to be on the post-game show tonight. That would have been just an hour-long victory lap for me. I think it was probably better for everybody that I wasn't available that night. I mean, like, Shohei feels on one hand too easy, but we saw him be pretty bad in the NLDS. And on the flip side, Mookie sounds crazy, and yet he was their best hitter alongside Teoscar Hernandez in the first round. But I mentioned the lefty stuff. You know what? I'll go Max Muncy. Give me Max Muncy, big hit in this series, just to go. And then the last one, the easiest question of the bunch: good Dave or bad Dave in the NLCS?
Oh, great Dave.
Great Dave. I was gonna say, is it good Dave or great Dave? Which one do you want?
No, it's great. Dave is he's on rhythm. It's like Steph Curry in an empty gym right now with the way Dave is pushing the buttons from the dugout. It's a Doctober masterclass that we're all being treated to, and I expect a contract extension to come, within a month of the season ending for the Dodgers, whenever that is.
I'm with you. Dave's cooking. Stockton with a couple more super chats. We appreciate this. He said, if we had a healthy pitching staff, we would have coasted through the playoffs this year. No doubt in my mind. How big of a loss is Vesia and who replaces him? We both are predicting that Brent Honeywell is going to be the guy that replaces Vesia. I mentioned, I'm curious if Kasperius versus Gonsolin is more of a conversation, but how would you answer the first part of that, which is how big of a loss is Alex Vesia in this series? Because you can make a pretty compelling open and shut case that there are four guys that are in a tier of their own in the Dodgers bullpen, and Vesia is one of them.
It's significant for that reason, because as much as, maybe you don't necessarily need a lefty, because of how the Mets have hit left-handed relievers, like that wouldn't be a strength for the Dodgers. Like I mentioned when we were discussing Vesia's injury, fact of the matter is the Dodgers don't view him as only a loogie option. I mean, he's high leverage, any kind of scenario. If they can match him up against left-handed hitters who struggle, then yes, they do that. But he's not in that box only. So it's notable / borderline significant because he is one of their more trusted relief pitchers. But I don't think it's anything that they wouldn't be able to overcome.
Yeah, I mentioned at the beginning that the Mets actually are one of the better teams against left-handed pitching, and that all 9 guys in their starting lineup are pretty average to above average to way above average against lefties. So if there was ever a team to be missing your lefty, like this would have hurt way more if it happened right before the Padres series than it does heading into the Mets series. That said, I think Vesia is really, really good. And in a 7-game series where you're going to need all 13 pitchers on the roster to contribute, I think that does matter.
And real quick,
say maybe Joe Beimel can fill in, and he owes us. So I don't know if we want Joe Beimel. Last I heard, he was still trying to make a comeback not too long ago. But that was an unsuccessful comeback, in case you were curious.
Yeah, I was going to say I hadn't heard, so it's not surprising. EC says Turtleneck is a right-handed pitcher, though, obviously referencing Brent Honeywell and the turtleneck that he wears. As we mentioned earlier in the show, the reality is the Dodgers don't really have a left-handed option that they could replace Vesia with and where it would really make sense. And again, this still ties back to the broader point of the Mets hit left-handed pitching pretty well. So having a lefty for the sake of having a lefty isn't really doing anything for you at this point.
They were 4th in weighted runs created plus against left-handed pitching.
Here we go with those stats.
Season. Yeah. So do you want to tell the people, Matt, what that means?
I don't know. Something about league, like averaging ballpark factors and league averages and adding a plus and a lowercase letter and 2 uppercase.
Well, you could just take out the letters. They were 4th in baseball against left-handed pitching. How's that?
That works. I like that. That's a lot more. It's a lot cleaner.
There you go. Stockton says Kike needs more credit for those 2 picks in the 9th. I gave it to him. I like both of those plays. I think those were not quote unquote routine plays. They were expected to be made plays, but given the context, 9th inning, 2-run game 5, and you've been playing center field the entire day and then coming in to play third. I thought those 2 plays should not be overlooked. The other play in game 5, and I'm a Will Smith homer, so you can accuse me of that. I'm fine with it. The 3-1 pitch call and the 3-1 pitch to Tatis that he grounded into a double play. Like, maybe it's because I just get defensive of all the people that have critiqued his pitch calling, but that pitch call and Yamamoto executed it perfectly, knowing that Tatis was going to be aggressive and knowing that he could throw him something slightly out of the zone and get him to chase, I thought was fantastic. And that was a huge moment. It was the only time they put a guy in scoring position all night. And those are just moments that like could very easily be overlooked. But I thought those were huge moments, both the plays from Kike as well as the pitch call from Will Smith. And again, the pitch execution from Yamamoto. I see Jonathan, props to Will for getting the pitching staff through 24 scoreless innings. And by the way, miracles have been accomplished, Matt. Did you know this? The Dodgers did not need to substitute their catcher at any point in a 5-game series. I've been told for years it's way too much to ask for one guy to catch 5-7 games in a row. But good Lord, Will Smith, I mean, I don't know what he's been doing, but miracles, Matt, miracles.
Yeah, I mean, I think the off days this year were maybe he
God,
had a different approach to the off days this year, and that helped keep him in the lineup.
Are you predicting is Barnes going to make a start in the NLCS?
It wouldn't fully shock me if it's game 2 because of the quick turnaround. Like that's when they typically have done it, is when it's a day game after a night game. So it wouldn't fully shock me if it's. I think if Barnes starts, it would be game 2 or game 5.
Please don't put me on the post-game show either of those nights.
And I will say, I don't think he would start both of those games. I think he'll start one of the first 5, and the 2 options are 2 or 5.
That'd be crazy. People, Hawaiian Kira, what is that all about? I got asked this on social media. Why is game 1 on Monday? I had 2 theories. One was, obviously they've got a New York team, so they don't want these games all starting at like 9 p.m. East Coast time, I think is part of it. And secondly, because the ALCS just finished today, and because one of those teams is going to have to travel, my guess was they wanted game 1, which will be on Monday, to be a night game rather than them having to play the 1 p.m. game. Like those were the only 2 guesses. Do you have any insight into why it's a 1:10 weekday game?
I think it's TV/travel driven.
Yeah.
Because like you said, the Dodgers, my guess is the Dodgers are flying out Monday night. Because
true. They have to get back for game 3. True.
They will use Tuesday in New York as a off day /workout at Citi Field. And so you're not going to be, although they have done it in the past. I don't know about going to the East Coast where they have traveled like on the off day and then gone basically straight to the field, but 5-hour flight, losing 3 hours makes that a little not quite as feasible as, maybe going to Arizona type thing.
Yeah, Esteban points out that Monday you're also competing with the NFL. I don't know if that plays into it, but you've got Monday Night Football. I know. Look, okay.
Talking to the wrong guy.
I know. I love Monday Night Football. Anna was asked a question. I don't have it pulled up, but I believe it was something along the lines of like, is there an advantage that the Dodgers have? We talked about the bye week and the layoff and that being a bad thing. Well, now the Mets have had some extra time off compared to the Dodgers. Do you think that's an advantage or a disadvantage? Anna, I don't remember the exact question, so hopefully I'm doing it justice. But do you think that time off for the Mets is an advantage or a disadvantage? Or I suppose neither.
I think the advantage is they've been able to line up their pitching how they want to.
Yeah.
So that is a benefit to, not having to go to 5 games in the NLDS, is you can start to set things up for the next series. And so that's the benefit. I'm not necessarily as worried of, momentum type thing. Yeah.
I agree. I mean, keep in mind the Mets do have to travel across the country. So one of those days is kind of a wasted day in the midst of it. For anybody that's ever had to travel across the country, that doesn't feel like a total off day. So I think that's part of it. So Anna, hopefully that answered your question. I did see we've got some folks watching from all over the place. Tom here from Stockholm, Sweden. We had somebody from the Philippines earlier. We had somebody from Japan earlier as well. So we greatly appreciate all of you for joining us. Stockton with another super chat, just piling them in. We appreciate it. He said, Teoscar better get signed. Salary prediction. Anthony and I think that it's going to be in the $20 to $25 million a year range. The question is it going to be 3 years? Is it going to be 4 years? Is it going to be 5 years? The note that's worth pointing out is that the Dodgers almost assuredly will extend him a qualifying offer, which will hurt his market. There are also some other guys, namely Juan Soto and Santander, a bunch of outfielders, basically, who are going to be hitting the market, who are, in some people's eyes, rated more highly than Teoscar Hernandez. So if I threw out a number like 4 years and $95 million, would you take the over or the under on what Teoscar ends up signing for? So that would be like $23.5 million a year for 4 years.
I think over.
Okay.
not necessarily over in years, but I think money wise, he could end up surpassing that.
Yeah, and look, I mean, he's not young. What's he, 32? Something like that. So it's not like he's washed, but he's not he's not, entering his prime. We know the defense is not something you're signing up for, although he's still playable. It's not a JD Martinez situation. Alex asked, can Teo give us a hometown discount? I actually believe and I compared this not in a mean way to Corey Seager, where Corey Seager, when he became a free agent, like the Dodgers were getting no advantage whatsoever in order to bring him back. I think Teoscar is going to desire re-signing with the Dodgers. So whether that's, hey, we'll give you a chance to match anything, whether that's, okay, sure, I'll take a couple million less here because I want to be here, I want to win. I do think that's going to be in the mix for Teoscar. So that the qualifying offer, I think it might be a little lower than people are expecting, plus competition in the marketplace. That's why something like 495 sounds about right for me. So you said you're going over on maybe not years, but maybe 400, something like that.
Yeah, I think so. And real quick before we move on, Stockton, you've done a bunch of super chats tonight. We appreciate that. Send me an email or tweet our account. Hopefully you're on other social media. Reply and maybe let us know what other social media accounts you have, and we'll see about getting you some DB care package or something as a thanks.
There we go. Look at that. We appreciate it. We appreciate it. If you've got some questions, throw that in the chat. We'll get to a couple more of those. We're approaching the 90-minute mark, almost 1,600 people, but Matt and I have a little bit of extra time to answer those questions. So, excuse me. We'll see if my voice holds up. If you've got any questions, if you want to ask Matt about Lincoln Riley, you can ask him about that. If you've got food questions, if you want to ask me about how I'm feeling about my Oregon Ducks, all these things are on the table. So here we go. Like Mike wants to know, is anyone on DodgerHeads attending any of the Dodgers home games?
Yes, that is now Blake. So I had the NLDS. Blake has all of the NLCS, and if the Dodgers advance, Blake also has all of the World Series. So that's great for us. The downside is it's somewhat bad news for you guys because it's certainly it's a lot of work being there, needing to get everything. And so Blake's free time to be on videos is unfortunately going to be away. So we'll have to see maybe on an off day if we could kind of squeeze him in, but we'll kind of figure that out as we go.
Yeah, there you go. There you go. And who knows? I mean, I know Daniel has access to some tickets. So Blake will be credentialed, whether or not Scott or Daniel or Matt or somebody like that. I think Anthony made it to one of the NLDS games as well. So that remains to be seen. I will not be at any of them. As you know, I live in the Pacific Northwest. So we will be watching from afar, which is the next question. Hawaiian Care wants to know, no matter results or the lineup, will Jeff be on Tuesday? Yes, I will. We were just filling out our schedule for the rest. And if this is a positive thing, you're hoping that I'm on, I have good news. I will be on a lot in the next week. And if it's a negative thing for our guy who didn't like me and Matt doing shows, bad news. I'm going to be on a lot this week. I think almost every day except for Sunday, I will be on. So looking forward to it. This is the old days. I mean, 2020, when we launched this thing, Matt, was the first time we started doing post-game shows. I believe I was doing pre and post-game shows for every single postseason game. So this feels light, only doing post-game shows, 5 times a week or something like that, because we got so many people nowadays. So, and then depending on days, we'll have a mix of kind of normal people. I know Scott will be in there, Matt will be in there, Anthony will be in there. So we've got a great cast of rotating people that will be on as well. Alleluia wants to know, are people ready for the East Coast bias reporting? Are you ready, Matt?
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't bother me. So yes, I think, look, after dealing with Padres fans for the past, week or so, I can't imagine anything's going to be worse than that, because the smallest thing that wasn't even necessarily a slight was perceived as such. And I got a bunch of replies about stuff, this and that. So yeah, little East Coast bias isn't gonna. I'm looking forward to that after what we just dealt with.
Stockton wants to know, are you Rams fans? Any chance they bounce back? Daniel is our resident Rams fan. Stuff. The wide receiver room's looking real thin. I got a couple of those guys. I got Stafford on my fantasy team, and I would tell you I'm not optimistic. I'm not optimistic. Excuse me, Stockton.
Yeah,
you have nothing.
I mean, I know that they're dealing with a bunch of injuries. I couldn't tell you who they're playing tomorrow. So, but no, I say they don't bounce back just because of all their injuries.
There you go. Yes, I see someone asking Dodger Dave if I live in Oregon. I do live in Oregon. Okay, we've got some more. GI wants to know, any chance Mookie gets reps at second against lefties with Pages in right field? So basically, you would keep Kike in center field instead of Pages in center. Basically, Pages in right field versus Pages in center field.
I don't see it. It's not the worst idea in terms of Mookie playing second base, but Pages has not played a ton in right field. Like anytime he's pretty much come in has been center field. So I don't see them in the playoffs all of a sudden saying, "Hey, go play right field." Short of a crazy set of circumstances.
Chris wants to know, sorry if this was addressed, I may have missed it. Would Vesia be available to return if the Dodgers make the World Series?
So it wasn't, Dave Roberts didn't say one way or the other when discussing Vesia's injury, and nor did he say like if it's an intercostal strain or what the specifics are. Considering what we know, I wouldn't think that it's likely that he's on that, just because those injuries can be kind of tricky. But I mean, if it is on the more mild side, then perhaps.
Jonathan, why have you not brought up Gavin Stone? He saved our season. How do you think he'll come back from the surgery? We mentioned it briefly. He's going to miss. The expectation is he'll miss all of next season with shoulder surgery. Look, we're talking about the NLCS. We're trying not to talk about free agency, let alone guys who are going to miss the entire season. It's not a knock on Gavin Stone. As you say, he was a huge part of the Dodgers winning the division and getting there. So it's a fair point, but that's why, just because we're talking about today and tomorrow and the next week, and we'll have plenty of time to talk about Gavin Stone and him missing in his injury in the offseason, which is hopefully as short of an offseason as humanly possible. Noisy Ninja, Dodgers beat the Padres. Are we getting the Mark Prior pitching thing you guys were being coy about? I don't know what she's referring to here.
I'm not 100% sure. I know there have been times on here when I've alluded to Mark Prior being the person who gets a lot of the credit. I have also heard that Connor McGinnis is a significant factor in the Dodgers pitching realm. So I don't know, Noisy Ninja, if that answers your question. I'm not sure 100%. But that's the only thing that I have and that comes to mind.
Okay. Dong wants to know, did you get Panda today? There was a long line at La Cañada Panda.
That's funny. I didn't, and I wonder if is that usually the case at that location, or was it because the Dodgers won and people are celebrating with some orange chicken, which rightfully so. I'm jealous of everybody that was in line for that.
It's true. It's true. We got another super chat from Stockton here. Will Ohtani bat leadoff next year? Also, even when he is on the mound, I would like to see him pitting between Betts and Freddie. I would imagine that the status quo is now Ohtani leadoff, Mookie second, and that would be kind of the default unless something crazy happens. That's where I lean. What about you?
Yeah, I agree. I mean, that arguably should have been the setup to begin with. I know it was something we discussed early in the offseason after he was signed. I think because Mookie was kind of the incumbent on the team and he had made it pretty clear over as to what his preference was, that the Dodgers kept him in the leadoff spot. But Mookie being kind of the team guy and team leader that he is, he now says he doesn't care where he hits. So I would imagine that Ohtani stays in the leadoff spot. And I see real quick, Noisy Ninja saying it was kind of implying that Mark Prior isn't actually the brains behind the operation. Yeah, I mean, if that wasn't my intention, if that's how it was implied, it was more so just that that Connor McGinnis is again involved in a lot of it as well and doesn't necessarily get as much of it's always, on Twitter and stuff, you see the Prior lab and things like that, where Connor McGinnis, I think, deserves some credit as well from what I've heard.
Tien wants to know, will the Raiders win tomorrow against the Steelers? That is unfortunately my favorite team. And me and Matt might be playing wide receiver for the Raiders tomorrow. And Aiden O'Connell is much better than Gardner Minshew in my estimation. I don't think the Steelers are very good. So maybe, but I wouldn't bet on it. How about that? I wouldn't bet on it. Okay, last question we've got here. Eric wants to know your biased and your unbiased prediction for this series. I have said Dodgers in 6. That feels like a cop-out. I know, but you're biased and you're unbiased. So give us the, bringing balance to the force, Matthew Moreno, and your prediction there. And then give us on the text thread with your buddies, your prediction there.
So if I'm going balance, it's Dodgers in 6.
Dodgers in 6. Okay. Oh,
if I'm full send bias, I don't see this team being stopped. I think the Dodgers sweep.
Wow, there we go. Look at this. He picks the Padres in round 1, and he picks the Dodgers sweep
I didn't
in
pick
round
the
2.
Padres. I did
Yeah.
not pick the Padres.
Okay. Stockton just keeps coming in with the super chats.
So
Your
I know.
starting
Well,
5.
in Stockton, I didn't see if you did reply. I didn't see you saying that you're on other. We would need to get in touch with you to send you something because we appreciate all these super chats. So definitely, please respond. Like, let
Send
us
a
know if you're
message
on.
to me or to Matt or to Dodger Blue 1958 on social media. We're on Twitter, or if you're on Instagram, you can find Dodger Blue 1958 there.
I mean, or even Facebook if that's what you're on. Hopefully, you're not only on YouTube. I guess is what
Yeah.
we're getting at.
There you go. Starting rotation in 2025. Ohtani, Yamamoto.
Well, are we talking? Like, is this like opening day?
Yeah, I imagine. Like, I mean, I'm not optimistic that Glasnow's going to be pitching next year.
Right. Well, but he might be. Maybe he's back late in the year. That's why I was asking. But let's just keep opening day. That's fair.
I mean,
I
River Ryan's not.
I don't even know if Ohtani is technically opening day.
Really?
I mean, I know that
pitch in the postseason.
That's true. He still might.
Kershaw's an option. I've said all along, I think a guy like Jack Flaherty gets signed. My confidence has diminished in Jack Flaherty just because he's a lesser pitcher now than he was a couple months ago. I mean, I don't know. Like, I haven't checked on like what's the availability of Sheehan. I don't know. Like, Gavin Stone's out. I mean, Bobby Miller's probably in that group, right?
Yes.
Walker Buehler's a free agent. Kershaw has a team option. Tony Gonsolin, Dustin May. Those are 2 names.
I don't know about Dustin May. Not yet.
Esophagus
not opening
surgery?
day. Not opening day.
Really?
Yeah.
The esophagus thing? I thought his arm was going to be fine. I mean, who knows? Right. Don't count on Dustin May. So we're at
because
Ohtani.
It's also it's the esophagus, but he had to stop throwing. Like, he couldn't do any baseball. Like, that was part of the reason why he wasn't going to come back this year, was because he had to be shut down from baseball stuff for X amount of time.
Okay. So we've got Ohtani and Yamamoto. We've got Gonsolin, Kershaw. There's 4.
And then a free agent, and then a free agent. Glasnow's not going to be opening day. There's something coming down the line.
Yeah, I said, why didn't they just give us the news dump of Glasnow's done for next year too? But there we go. Okay, we got some more super chats pulling in. Tom, thank you. Mentioning he was coming from Sweden, so we appreciate that. 27 of whatever your monetary units are called. We appreciate that. Jeff wants to know. Jeez, please, my voice is giving out.
As Jeff is coming back, Tom, if you had a question, just throw it in like the regular chat and we'll answer it, since the super chat was blank.
Yeah, it says, if Yamamoto is only available for 1 game in the NLCS, would he be available for 2 in the World Series? And would the Dodgers move him to regular rest in 2025? The answer is yes to the World Series part. He could pitch game 4 of the NLCS, game 1 of the World Series, and game 6 of the World Series if necessary. Do you think they put him to normal rest, Matt, in 2025, or do you think he stays on this 6-man rotation thing?
I think it'll still be a 6-man rotation. And again, we need to also keep in mind that the Dodgers don't do like traditional rest, period. Right. Yamamoto or not, like, that's just not in the Dodgers playbook. And with Ohtani joining the rotation next year, it's really not going to be something that they do. Yeah. So I don't really see them getting too aggressive with changing Yamamoto's schedule too much. Maybe on occasion they try it here and there, but it's not something I would necessarily count on.
Yeah, I agree. Jeez Louise, before I die on the air here with the inability to breathe. I think that'll do it for us, folks. We appreciate you all. Over 1,500 people. We're approaching the hour and 40-minute mark. Thank you for being with us on a Saturday night. We've got a live post-game show tomorrow night after game 1 of the NLCS. We've got live content every single night of the week through the end of the NLCS, at least. We're hopeful through the end of the World Series, crossing our fingers, sort of like Dave Roberts does with Dodgers injuries. So if you have not already, subscribe, ring the notification bell, and make plans to join us for all of that. Matt mentioned we'll have an interview with David Vesia if things go according to plan tomorrow morning on this channel. You will want to see that. If you missed the NLDS one, I can assure you, if that guy brings the energy he brought to that one and the takes that he brought to that one, then kudos to that. We may be able to do a live show tomorrow once the rosters are announced, especially if there's a surprise. So again, just subscribe here. You'll get the notifications. Hey, they're about to go live to talk about the NLCS roster, that kind of thing. We'd greatly appreciate it. Folks, enjoy the rest of your night. That is Matthew Moreno. I am Jeff Spiegel. enjoy. As always, go Dodgers.